Hello friends and welcome to the channel. In this video we are going to be looking at some minor surgery, exhaust smoke using oil paint and some fuel stains. So grab yourself a brew and a bicky and let's jump straight into this build. So unsurprisingly, Tamiya, beautiful detailed cockpit, all the dials and knobs and everything that you need. And the first thing I'm going to start with is removing all of this detail. But we will come back to this shortly. There's a good reason for it, honestly. So after I've got it all removed and sort of sanded off, I'm going to start with the seat. So I just wanted to add a little bit more detail. So I'll put the padded sort of seat in the bottom using some green stuff. I sort of did my best to actually try and mould a sort of leg seated pattern into the chair. That I didn't do enough actually. It was a bit too shallow. I'd also moulded the sort of back rest, whatever you want to call it. So I did that. I'd also added the headrest as well using green stuff there. There is already a headrest there, but I decided to sort of do it because I could just make it all kind of like all uniform. I had a little bit of texture by stippling a sponge over the top, and this is why I removed all of the instruments, because obviously this is going to save me a bit of time painting. Now for these I have used Quinta Studios. For these, Nigel from Nigel's Modelling Workbench has gone on to me for a while about using these, and I've seen a few of his videos on it and they look absolutely fantastic, and in person they really do. As you can see, they've got a nice sort of gloss finish for the dials. You just remove them by soaking them in some water like you would normal decals, and then fix them with a little bit of super glue. You can use white glue if you want to, but I've used super glue for a definite fixing. What I was really impressed with as well, because we've got like 4 quadrants of panels if you like, these all fit perfectly. Now when normally, as long time viewers will know, I pretty much always use I was going to say LEDs, then Edard upgrades, and they can be a bit desirable, particularly in the colour. They generally don't usually sort of match the cockpit colour, and they generally don't usually fit very well in the panel areas. So this was quite nice that they fitted perfectly. As you can see, I've used again super glue and just sort of forced it down to sit, and there we go. Beautifully detailed, minimal amount of work, which is very nice. The only thing I will say about them is they're a little bit expensive. The grand total of these cost me about 17 quid for the set. It was just under £10 for the decals. Yeah, and I think it was like just under 8 quid in delivery. So they are a bit on the price side. It might be different on potential location, but that's how much I had to pay for them. So yeah, obviously we've got a seat belt as well, as you see in there. It's printed on both sides, and again just using a bit of super glue to fix it into place. But that said, I'm not disappointed by them. I think they are absolutely lovely set of aftermarket, so potentially I might be making a bit of a shift to these. Another upgrade I got for the kit was this Mini Craft Collections upgrade for the wings. Now what surprises me quite a bit about this kit is that it gives you options of having your flaps down. It has the sort of petals that you can have the sort of like across the engine closed. You can have, you've got a pilot and all that sort of stuff, but there's no option to have the wings folded up, which is obviously one of the kind of iconic parts of the aircraft. So I've got this kit which basically helps me fold it over. So because obviously they're all 3D printed parts, we've got gun barrels, we've got the guns themselves, a little bit of wiring there for wiring up the guns and sort of the electrics to the wings. We've got stays that will go between the aircraft and the wings, and obviously we have the sort of like wing inner parts, if you like, 3D printed there as well. So we've got the one for the outer wing, and then that one there which is the inner wing, which will be able to see the inboard gun. Now I will admit I was a bit nervous about doing this because this was a modification I had to do properly rather than my usual modifications, which usually makes the aircraft look more of a wreck than anything else. But yeah, so the instructions for these are relatively simple to follow. They're not too bad. But as you can see here, I've used some panel liner just to show you where the cut needs to be going. So this is the underwing, so we've got sort of a straight down, a slight kink in there, and then we've got the top wing. Now the sort of inner peg area, as you can see me trying to cut out there, I actually have to cut these off later on because they're not actually needed. The arms, or if you want to call them that lower and raise the wing, the sort of the hooking area actually is all moulded into that, so I didn't need to be so precious about doing this bit. But as you can see, we're using a razor saw for most of it, cutting the major parts, and then what I was doing is going to the other end of the side of the wing to basically just make it a bit easy, because it is a very thick bit of plastic. So when I start seeing the sort of pressure lines, if you like, on the inside, I'll go in with a blade and sort of cut through from the other side. This sort of just made the cut, in my opinion, a little bit easy. It took a while, but it worked quite nicely in the end. Now before I started putting these parts in, I needed to put the wheel bay doors in. Now something that I wouldn't have wanted to do this early on, but because they also make up the walls of the gear bay, I kind of had to put them in now. They are actually quite robust. I didn't break these at all during the build. As you can see, I've popped that in. There's a bit of a gap, so just a bit of a squeeze, put some super glue in there, and it's not too bad. You may need to take some, particularly towards the front leading edge of the wing, you might need to take some material off to get these to seat further in, but generally they are quite straightforward in fitting. As you can see me cutting those tabs off there, which I didn't need to worry about in the first place. And there you can see I'm putting the connector parts in, which just has that sort of tab on the inside. Once it's folded over, you don't really notice it anyway, so it's not really a problem. The one thing I had to do was fill the back where the flap is. I had to fill that in with some putty just to clean that out. It's not accurate, but it was just something I did just to sort of clean that area up. And there you can see a quick little dry fit, and so it all fits together really nicely. It's very nicely designed. Now, as I said, you've got brass barrels. These ones are on the outer wing. They just fit in where the barrels should go for the plastic version. They fit in quite nicely. You just have to make sure that they're straight. And then with the inboard guns, which I haven't, for some reason, filmed, once you've put the sort of firing block in, you just feed the barrel into there, and again, that's very straightforward. No major issues with that. So because I haven't filmed that, I've put their sort of stock photo in here so you can see how it should all look like. There is you can see a bit of a bar that goes from the lower wing to the upper wing, that pulls it down. I couldn't actually fit that on mine because there was a couple of stoppers I need to put in for the wing supports, and because I didn't put them, it folds too far over. I didn't realise this until a lot later on, but I don't think it really makes all that much difference. I mean, it probably will to you guys now because now I've mentioned that fact. Now, the only bit that wasn't clear was this sort of strikey part that meets with the flap. It doesn't tell me to cut that sort of angle in for some reason, so that was something I had to adjust later on. Now, the only sort of scratchy buildy bit I did on this was this lower intake. It's a plastic thick part, doesn't go anywhere. It's just sort of like a blanking plate, if you like. This was a photo etched grill off a tank, and that looked about kind of looked about right to me, and I think it looks very smart and better than just a solid lump of plastic. Now, one of the other options is having the dive brakes open. I haven't done this, but I just wanted to just show you that they have actually done the in detail, and they have in the fuselage as well. Like I said, I'm not doing this. I don't know why, I just didn't want to break up the fuselage that much, so I've just plonked these into place and glued them. You will have to cut a little bit of the tab off because it's moulded to hook to have it in the open position. Now the last upgrade I bought were these tyre upgrades. Now I've not really shown you much with the undercarriage because it's quite an easy fitting part, and it's something I don't put until a bit later on, but just wanted to show you these up close. Nicely detailed, got Goodyear branding on it as well, and all the little details that go on. There is obviously the tail wheel there as well. It's a very nice simple piece that is. It's surprisingly a small wheel for the size of the aircraft. Does come with a replacement undercarriage piece for that, which that just quite happily fits into the original hole, so there's no need to sort of adjust this. It will just literally just fit in. All you need to do is just break off the supports, do a little bit of clean up, that's it. Stick the tyre on and then jam it up into the back of the wheel bay. Also, because 3D parts can be quite fragile in some cases, especially if they're quite delicate, but just in case with this wasn't put on again till towards the end. Now we move on to painting. This is generally actually quite a quick build, so this is why we're already 10 minutes in and we're already painting. Obviously the lower half I painted first because that was all white, and I've used some white tack to mark out the lower half and towards the front. Now usually you can get some feathered lines through this, but every time I try doing it they end up being quite straight and solid, so I will go over those a little bit later on. Now Tamiya give you the spray can colour for this, and I thought I'd match this up to what it should be, and after a while sort of looking at it and going, no, that's not quite right, it's a bit a little bit too dark for my liking. So in a bit I haven't filmed it, but I will lighten this up later on. But I'll show you what I did to feather the lines. I actually come back in with the white and come up very close and tight with it, and just followed the hard line that I'd done previously. But going back to the colour, I've seen several different versions and I find it difficult to pick out which is the right one. Yeah, see, I've seen some that like a blue and a light grey, but I've never seen any of them, I don't think, in this darker grey. So this was all completely redone with a bit of a mix of using XF66 light grey, XF, oh, I can't read my handwriting, I think that's 80, it's royal light grey and a little bit of white. It was the same sort of mixture I used on the Schnell boat. So over recent builds I have learnt I'm not going to do this with bare naked hands. I'm going to have to use gloves because they're just a mess by the time I finish with them. But these are quite straightforward canopies to mask up, so I didn't bother with a set. As you can see, I've just with the front windscreen, just push it down quite firmly and then use the cocktail stick to cut into the panels, and then just went around it with a very sharp blade extremely carefully. Right, now here you can sort of see that I've finally lightened the colour up a little bit. With the colour grade on the camera, it's probably not quite far off, to be fair to that, so it's like a kind of like a whitey grey. With the anti-flash panel on the front, I used a sort of a whitey grey colour to dirty it up a little bit. Later on I went over it with enamel wash, which was stone grey for black aircraft, or black from MiG ammo, just to sort of emphasise it a little bit, the panels, and make it a little bit dirty as well. I also decided to do the grip tape, or the walkway tape, because it does come as a decal, but if you use a sponge quite thick and heavy on it, it gives you the sort of right texture for that kind of like grip tape. So now for the decals. Now a lot of people say Tamiya decals are quite thick, and I will tend to agree with that, but I don't think they're too bad. But in some ways that's quite good when you've got a massive decal like this. I mean, I think I've repositioned this about 4 or 5 different times, but what I tend to do is, obviously I use micro set and micro sol, but what I tend to do afterwards is I will go over it with a cocktail stick and force it into the panels, and you know, make them a bit obvious, as you can see I'm doing here. But you can sort of see, even with the micro sole, it has already started to sort of sink in. I think sometimes if you sort of stipple it a little bit with the brush before it sort of starts going off, or as you apply it, I tend to think that helps a little bit more, but that's me. Now for washes, now I'm starting to use oil paints more regular for this part, and for this particular one I've used raw umber, Payne's grey and black. If you took the Payne's grey out and just used the other two, you would get basically what was the same as a Tamiya panel wash, but I've added the grey because it's a grey colour, and I tend to find this works a lot nicely. Now I've given this a satin varnish and then diluted the oils quite a bit, so they do pretty much run on their own, but I tend to just slather it over, and what I will do later on, I will just, the same as any panel liner, just sort of force them into the panels. Now I wanted to try something a little bit different with the exhaust stains. Every time I've tried to airbrush them, they just never look quite right. They sort of never seem to flow very well. So what I've used is the raw umber again and a little bit of black, but I've also added a little bit of yellow in there as well. As I go through the layers, I add more of a blacky brown colour into it to give it that very hefty sort of, I assume it by this point it's soot. Might be a bit of oil, I don't know, but that filth that the Skyraider is very well known for. Now at this point I decided to do chipping. I should have actually, what I would have wanted to do this earlier on. At this point I just felt there was something missing, and the chipping was it. So afterwards I just went over the exhaust stains again, and then across the model just to blend it all in. A very heavily diluted raw umber, and as you can see I've used a paper towel to dab it up, and it gives you that kind of sort of dirt mottled effect, which was a bit of a surprise to me. It worked out a lot better than I intended it to. Now something I decided to do very early on in the build was to replace all the navigation lights with clear sprues bit. So I've got some photo etch that has these sort of teardrop patterns in, and all you need to do is have a clear bit of sprue, heat it over a candle, and then force it through, and then just cut them off. And as you can see, obviously I've coloured them in the sort of the right colours, which I think are right from the photos that I've seen, but I think that just makes it pop a little bit more, look a bit more, you know, right than just paint them over a plastic light thing. So to the fuel tanks, again pretty much the same as we've done with the exhaust stains and everything else, but here what I'm using is a flat brush with a very small amount of thin on it, and what I've done is I've made some basically fuel streaks from it. Very easy, just it does take a bit of backwards and forwards. Again, if you put a sort of a semi-gloss coat on, anything you don't like, you can wipe it away. With this one, you can see at the front there, there's I've seen a couple of them, there's like a bit of an oil leak, and I've put a little couple of splatters on the top and a little bit of a rundown, and again sort of the airflow catching it and sort of accumulation on the bottom there. It's just something I've wanted to try and do for a while, and I think these are probably some of the best ones for this that I have done. So at this point it was basically starting to put things all together. The undercarriage has gone on, the fuel tanks have gone on as well. One thing I did, and it's something they've moulded in, is you can see that little red tab there. That's just to indicate that the wings are folded up and not locked into place. They've moulded it in, but you can't fold the wings up. Figure that one out. Anyway, as you can see, the navigation lights there. The bombs I've done. The yellow's a bit rough. That was kind of intentional, but actually I kind of wish I'd done a bit better than that now. They do look a bit crap. But I've done a bit of chipping on there, and I've used some burnt umber and just done the same as I did earlier on with the sort of stippling wash that I did, just to make it a little bit dirty, because a lot of these things, bombs, sorry, are generally just left in dumps, which are pretty muddy. So that's the sort of look I've gone for. And again, at this point, it's just fixing them on. I've put some super glue in, and just to hopefully put them in the right position. Fortunately, it is a bit difficult to tell where those hooks kind of locate on. And you can see there the stay that goes in between the two. I'd re-drilled the holes. You can see the markings where this should go. I just drilled those out to make sure that these fit in, and then sort of pushed them together. So the very last thing for me to do was the propellers, and they do come with decals for the sort of prop markings, but I didn't like to use those because you always end up with a bit of a gap from the front and the back anyway. So I just got some masking tape and basically measured those out and tried to place them as accurately as I could onto them, and just sprayed them on. And just keep it all in keeping. Keep it all in keeping, does that make sense? Don't know. Just to keep it all making keeping, I've stippled some silver along the edges of the blades, and then afterwards I went in with a brush and just sort of made a bit of a dot to dots and added a few extra scratches in there. So there we go, my friends, it's nearly time to show you the finished build. But before we do that, and as always, I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching this video. I do hope you have enjoyed it. If you have and you're new around here, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. If you'd like to support the channel further, there are links in the description but down below, stuff like channel members. With channel members, you can get early access videos. I do semi-regular, or as regular as I possibly can, little blogs and sort of updates. You'll know before everybody else what's going on. On that note, I'd like to thank channel members John at Scale Modelling, Psyche Mac, Darren Hall and Andy Little. Thank you guys. Thank you guys ever so much for supporting the channel. It does mean a great deal. But of course, like I said, just following, sharing the videos, liking them, comments and all that sort of free stuff, that also generally does really help the channel grow. So whichever way you'd like, doesn't bother me. I generally really appreciate it. Does really help the channel. If you do like to go down the monetary route, everything comes straight back into the channel and helps me with everything pretty much. So again, I really appreciate it, and whichever way you'd like to support the channel will be fantastic. Anyway, with all that said, again, I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching the video. I generally do hope you have enjoyed it and hopefully learned a little bit on the way. Anyway, that's it for me for now, and enjoy the build and finished model, and I'll catch you again soon.